would say the Welsh are more curious than anything else. So they may ask you questions, about your background or sort of something. But I'd say they're more curious than racist. Because they would ask questions that were a bit too innocent, maybe. Oh, you got lovely hair. I remember thinking when I was a kid, or the first case I had of racism when I was a kid here was when I went to wash in the washroom, and there was another kid there, and he saw me washing, and he said, "I thought you used black soap." Now, I didn't look upon his, I looked upon his stupidity, ignorance, rather than sort of racism. But yeah, I mean, racism is here, but I would say it's not a major player in the sort of Welsh mentality. And you can't be racist down Tiger Bay. Ooh, you daren't. Somebody will pick it up and feed it back to you straight away. You can't say that, So whereas people will use terms like half-breed or whatever, you say that on Tiger Bay, and everybody within earshot will be aware of you speaking differently. Not necessarily being a racist, it's just language that you've sort of picked up. And of course people still use those sort of terms with ignorance and innocence or negligence and whatever. So I'd say it's more towards that area. Of course you do get outright racists that appear like anywhere else.
I'm 60 years old. What some people will call mixed heritage. Sometimes I have lots of issues personally with the descriptors of black and brown and mixed. The whole racial categorization is kind of problematic for me. So it's difficult for me to just give straight answers. But my paternal grandfather came from Barbados as a seaman. My maternal great-grandfather came from the Philippines as a seaman. And within that, there's a certain amount of English heritage, again, sometimes tied in with the sea. My mother, in particular, had a large family, and we had quite a large family. So within the sort of extended family, the in-laws and the relations by marriage, we've got all kinds of cultures and backgrounds and, to a certain degree, language, although in reality, everybody of this generation speaks English.
And it used to be that it's very typical to have a family where you had 2 or 3 religions in the family, and so the dad could be Muslim, say from Sudan as an example, and he's marrying a white Welsh woman, and she's sort of Christian, and then their son becomes Rasta. It was very, very common. You see that in a lot of families, and I'm typical of the mixture because I'm sort of mainland Africa, Cape Verde Islands. Then I've got Portuguese, I've got French through my grandmother, Polish through my grandmother, and I've got Arabic, and then born in sort of Wales. So I've got like seven cultures altogether, and that's very typical. Very, very typical. So you're used to being curious as kids, So we used to, I remember all the time going to different people's houses. Where I was born was not actually Tiger Bay, it was just outside in Butetown. Butetown's 1 square mile of Tiger Bay. And it was made you very curious about everything. So you used to go into a friend's house, tasting Spanish food, a Brazilian house, tasting their food, and whatever. So it became like diversity was normal. So you actually, sought people's diversity, whether some people want to stay with their own group, whatever that is. We were very, very different. And my house where I was born, in Mount Stewart Square, was it became a boarding house. It was a warehouse, but our previous house, right in the middle of Tiger Bay, had been destroyed during World War II. So we were put up at the chapel for a while, and then we were given this empty offices. No, empty warehouse. And then the offices became empty upstairs. So we had a huge family there. There was about something like about 12 adults and 19 children. It was huge, but the place was huge. You had like 4 floors.
Different people? Different families?
No, it was all my family. It was all my family. But we also had all the boarders. There were seamen. And so I'd see people obviously for Cape Verde, different parts of Africa. Remember there was a guy from what was then Ceylon, now called Sri Lanka, and he taught me to move my head the way that the Indians did. So I was picking up different things from them. My grandfather came over in about 1904 and said there were loads of mixed people there. We know the people, it became really mixed around about 1850. And there were people from my country, Cape Verde. We had Somali seamen, so we had various African seamen, people from Malaysia, people from Norway. It was quite mixed from the start.
So there, it became a safe place for people of different race and whatever have you. They were already living here, so there must have already been a certain amount of integration and whatever have you. But that's when it became kind of enshrined. This is Butetown. This is what we are, you know. And like I say, is a lot of people don't even know about the history of the riots and all those type of things. But they've actually left an indelible kind of attitude in us generations later, even probably the next 2 or 3 generations. But there's now the lines are almost invisible, but they're palpable as you walk across. You know you're back home. I actually live outside of Butetown now, but as I walk across the bridge, there's a kind of, here I am, you know. It was certainly seen as more of an underground, edgy kind of side of town, but it was also all the more appealing to all kinds of people. So it wasn't just these are the black nightclubs and everything goes, only the black people go there or anything like that. The very fact that that kind of culture and vibe, the music was available, meant that people from everywhere came in, even from Namibia. But somehow you do feel when it gets right down to the real crunch of things, you've got somebody behind you. So whether that's physically or morally or in whatever way, just to agree with you while you're ranting and raving about the injustices, you'll have somebody there with you. Time where, like I say, it became our byword. The fact that we were multi was our byword. That in itself didn't tell the whole truth, that there would still be some rivalries and still be some kind of discriminatory kind of thoughts, you know, them people or those people, whatever. Sometimes they might be on colour, sometimes it might be on religion, sometimes it might be on gender. I mean, to a certain degree, I won't say it's inherent as if it's inevitable, but it's a common factor amongst humans to find others, you know. But for the most part, people got over that, and not only got over that, we learned other people's and absorbed other people's cultures by osmosis. And so there's some things that happened that became kind of mutations of some original culture, but we did it our way, and over the years, and we did it wrong, and we did it differently, and 13 years later, it became something completely different. But it still has its elements in something that was done by a completely different group, possibly 20 or 30 years before.
But there was, they put the elders it was the first high-rise in Cardiff. They put the elders in high-rise. The difficulty with that were the elders were part of the community. And normally, it would be like I'd be walking to school or back from school, there'd be some old woman I went in a wheelchair or whatever, and she'd call me and go to the shop, buy something, she'd give you a couple of pennies or whatever. That was sort of normal. But also, they were like, in a way, like security, because they kept an eye on you. So if you were misbehaving, they knew your parents, they knew your family, they would sort of tell them. And like all ports, it attracts certain things like gambling and a certain amount of prostitution. But the prostitution down the bay was incredible, because what would happen if you were out late in the evening? The woman would know your family, know where you lived, and would say, "Hey, I'll take you back home." Your mother would give her a cup of tea. She'd go back out on the job again. So it was the people who were involved in that business, just part of the community. And there was a famous woman from South Africa who was actually a princess, and she came over here to learn about nursing and take it back home again. But she got mistreated on board ship, and in the end, she too became a sort of woman of the night, as we called them. But the thing with her was, anybody that knew at the time, she really looked after children. I remember going into a shop around the corner from this famous club called Casablanca, and she'd go in the shop, see some kids there, and say to the guy whoever's around the shop, "Hey, give me some sweets," and maybe give me a couple of pence for it. So she was really part of the community. So that's what made everybody part of the community, no matter what they did. And where I was born, there was a chapel, a famous chapel down the road, and that became a club called the Casablanca Club. And it was a famous club. It used to draw people like Richard Burton, Aretha, I think it was Aretha Franklin played it, but somebody famous like that. And it had all sorts of entertainment, like it had a Welsh night, where they had the Welsh-speaking bands. It had the sort of reggae nights and the rock and all that sort of stuff. So again, it was really sort of part of the part of the community. The problem that they had is, you've got to imagine, Wales is a very puritanical country, very strictly Christian religion, and suddenly they see this port, and it spread from Cardiff to the nearby ports of Newport and Bury, and they see all these mixed peoples. So somebody could look at you and say you're black, and you say, "Yeah, I'm black, but I'm this, I'm that, and that, and that." So for them, that wasn't the way things should be done. It should be kept strictly. So there was lots of problems with the media talking about these mixed race kids running around, all sorts of nonsense. And there was a famous episode where the chief constable for Glamorgan, the whole area, he made the statement about, that's right, it was about the West Indians. They were out there playing cricket with their flannel trousers waving, and they were attracting the white women. So that was the sort of thing that people faced. To a degree, most people would only stay in the Tiger Bay, Butetown area. When they went north to the city, they met conflicts.
There's a man called Mr. Ali. My father told me this when I was young. When Mr. Ali came here, he was an Indian. And about 15, 20 years later, he was a Pakistani. And about 15 years later, he was a Bangladeshi. But he was still there. He was still Mr. Ali in the same house, in the same street in Butetown. But the whole world, in that sense, the artificial world, the administrative world, changed around him. He was still Mr. Ali. So it kind of shows the artificiality of some of the categorizations of who and what we are. But I'll say this, they came from places that don't exist anymore in some cases. Or the idea of nationalities and geography is kind of so artificial that the nations that are being created are dissolved in the time period that we're talking about. I mean, I've actually lived through some of that, but this community, especially, like I say, in the 19th century, it lived through so many of those things.
Whispering your name, asking where you'd gone. It fell softly from the clouds on the silent crowds as I wandered on. Out of doorways, black umbrellas came to pursue me. Face-lost people as they passed were looking through me. No one knew me. Yesterday I shut my eyes, face up to the skies, drinking in the rain. But your image still was there, floating in the air.